Hello and welcome to Film Slam Stream's post-film conversation for Looking for Johnson Grass. My name is Eric Siler, and I'm an instructor of film, media arts, and communications, as well as moderator for this conversation. We're very pleased to be joined by the director of Looking for Johnson Grass, Jeremy Schwochow. Jeremy is from Westlake, Ohio, and graduated from Ohio State last spring. He's primarily worked on the indie narrative and documentary shorts around Ohio with an assortment of freelancing within the film industry. Presently, he is doing a year-long service AmeriCorps in Mesa Verde National Park in southwestern Colorado. Hello, Jeremy, and welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for that warm welcome.
It's,
Happy to be here.
it's great to have you here. Great, you could take some time out over in Colorado to join us. Today, we'll talk a little bit more about what you're doing out there a little later. But first, Looking for Johnson Grass. Were you looking for this film? How did this come about? Were you actually looking for Johnson Grass? How did
Yeah.
you teamed up with Nate in making this film?
Yeah, so a little bit. I guess I wasn't necessarily looking to make this film specifically, but it was my senior thesis film at Ohio State. So I had to make something by the end of the year. And for lack of a better word, Nate was kind of had been my buddy and kind of collaborator and muse, really. He was always the person who I'd be able to point a camera at in college. So when he was doing his graduate degree in University of Alabama, but he was coming back up. He was going to give me a ride home from Columbus to Cleveland. And he was like, "Do you mind if we stop and do some collecting of this Johnson grass thing that I'm doing?" And I was like, sure, got some extra time. Sounds fun. Get outside. And yeah, we pulled over. We did the avoid highways route on along I-71 and just kind of pulled off in these random cornfields and parks and digging up grass. I pulled out my phone because it was kind of pretty beautiful sunny day, and just ended up really liking it and kind of got hooked and ended up didn't have any other ideas. So I kind of leaned in with it and ended up going on a road trip with Nate later that fall and started to film the real deal.
Okay, so when you pulled over and he started digging up grass, did he explain to you exactly what he was doing, the history behind it and so forth that made you interested?
For sure. I think it was the way he kind of prefaced it, we kind of always had these conversations of like science communication because he was doing biology in undergrad in Ohio State, and we'd been friends for since high school. And I'd be kind of go back and forth about what I was learning with like film theory and stuff, and him science, and kind of finding these unexpected parallels and connections with how they could really work together. So this is kind of a final kind of like almost the last collaboration we did in Ohio State. So we've been on the trip. We've been talking about kind of this stuff about how these jumping genes and what it kind of meant for adaptation and genetics within his science world. And I just thought it was pretty because it was also just kind of picturesque. I love, road trip kind of movies and kind of just being in nature and stuff. So he had told me about that and kind of that kind of got me hooked with the story beyond just collecting.
Well, so when did you decide to actually use this as your thesis film? Because that's a lot of pressure. You're going into your last year, you got to figure out what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Were you really kind of thinking about this? Or once you saw this, you said to yourself, I got to do this. What else were
Yeah.
you considering at the time?
Yeah, so I hadn't we our thesis was set up over a full year and we were supposed to come in with an idea like fresh in August, which of course nobody did. But he was like part of an idea. I thought he was going to be one part of kind of like an anthology of a bunch of people who were kind of I was trying to make this kind of vague, oh, my friends who are passionate about like this dance teacher, my orchestra teacher friend, and how like there's like overlapped and kind of how passion overlaps with kind of labor and work kind of thing. But kind of Nate kind of crowded it out, and none of the other ideas ended up working out. Part for just part logistical stuff, part I didn't really end up doing it. So probably in October, in the fall semester, I did kind of just kind of double down. I was like, okay, I'm going to do Nate. I was one of the first people to end up filming my thesis. So even though I felt like I was behind, I was ahead in the objective sense. So it was still late, but yeah, I kind of decided like midway through my year.
So this thesis process, you said you're supposed to come in with the idea. Did you actually have to pitch this and get
Yeah.
approved or feedback and so forth? If so, tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah. So I was in a newer program at Ohio State called the Moving Image Production Program. So at the end of our 4 years together, there was a year-long thesis workshop we kind of did with all of my other classmates and stuff. So we had a teacher and kind of all of us were making projects together. So we did end up having to pitch the idea. There's like kind of a brainstorming phase and kind of pitch deck stuff kind of along the way, different assignments and stuff. It kind of evolved as we were going to our needs, but it was kind of like we all knew what we were doing, and when our ideas changed, we kind of had to reintroduce it. So I was always really lucky to get a lot of positive, constructive criticism and feedback from my classmates on that, which I owe to a lot of what it ended up being.
Okay, so with that feedback, you had a plan going into filming this, but naturally it's changed.
Yeah.
How did the film change from, the first filming to the final edit?
Yeah, I think this is I usually feel like, yeah, the filmmaking process often changes quite a bit. And I felt like this was the one where I feel like that story I was telling when we were pulled over from Columbus to Cleveland, and that phone footage is some of the first footage you see in the film, actually. So I was pleasantly surprised and I feel like this is one of the first projects where I was like, oh, I see that kernel kind of grow and become more, and kind of see that arc expand. Um, but yeah, like I was saying, I thought it was going to be just one little like 3 minute thing, like 3 minute short film about Nate, and it ended up being a whopping 8 minutes. But um, yeah, I guess it was kind of I started filming first kind of that B-roll, um, that original B-roll with my phone. Then I got a cinema camera for the road trip we did through the South. And then I didn't end up actually recording any audio until way after, a couple months after, in like January, February. And that was about a time where I was in Ohio, Nate was in Alabama. It was still more COVID-y stuff kind of going on. So I didn't end up, as you see, there's no like um, talking head interview or anything like that. It was all the audio is recorded um, long distance, sort of in a way like that. He was recording on his little phone in his apartment. So it definitely changed a lot. There was a lot of going stuff that I was like, oh, this is pretty, but I don't have anything to like. He's not talking about this. And then he would add new stuff that kind of would change. I did 2 like hour-and-a-half long interviews with him, so it was a lot of like kind of just running it through a transcript and then finding those pieces I liked and then trying to work it, just like knead it like bread and hopefully just eventually get it to somewhere I liked the flow of it, and I liked what was in there and I wasn't leaving anything out.
So if you could have added something more to this, what would you have added?
I had I had worked a couple times, and there's like a really rough edit of kind of like the more like historical view of Johnson Grass that I couldn't really get in there just because of I tried to do it with Nate. It was like a little bit of like, oh, let's try recording this, and I didn't really like the flow. And the big thing was there was not a lot of footage that I had at my disposal. I was trying to go through archival stuff, and you see a little bit of that, which isn't directly Johnson Grass stuff, or footage, or like the old timey, or no, the black and white film that I took from an internet archive online. But I couldn't find any, like, obviously there's not as many historical photographs of Johnson Grass in the 1800s. They weren't necessarily taking pictures of Johnson Grass. But it's this really interesting history, kind of how basically these Confederates, or the son of a Confederate governor, was like, this is a great idea. Let's bring over this the seed, this from, it was within hemp seeds from Turkey, I believe. And they brought it over and planted it in their fields. Like, this will be the great forage crop. And you hear a little bit of this in the doc, but basically, long story short, yeah, it ends up Johnson Grass is really super not. If it gets cold, it turns poisonous, basically. So it doesn't work out, and it's kind of this fun blunder in history that I think has some interesting reach.
Yeah, it does have that yeah, really interesting and educational reach as well too. I
Yeah.
know that this documentary, you try to keep it as organic as possible. Not trying to do reenactments and add in animation and so forth. Why did you approach it that way instead of, maybe enhancing it more?
Yeah. I think a lot of what that's kind of, I like that that's personally what I like to watch is kind of that organic feeling that where it feels like it really is just even with all the like the, you see the aperture adjustment or the shaky camera and it's just like it's just what it was like. I wanted to feel like how I wanted to put people in the view of like they're riding along with Nate just as I was kind of thing. And show them how my relationship with Nate like through the camera almost in a way. And actually, there is technically a reenactment in there. If anyone remembers Richard from West Virginia in Goldtown, he's talking about his field. It's actually my dad, who I got to just go to the Cleveland Metro Parks, Rocky River Reservation, and just I'm like, okay, here's the lines, just kind of mouth them and just point. And so I got my dad a cameo in there, but it does it was the similar style, but yeah, just a
Very
fun little
clever.
thing. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. So you got the film shot. You did the editing yourself as well,
Yes, yeah.
and so tell us about the screening of this film from your classmates to the festival circuit. What has the response been like?
Yeah, so it started off with like kind of that intimate classroom setting where everyone kind of knew the history and was super supportive, but it's also this kind of funny narrative where everyone's like, it's the silly grass that no one cares about. Even my teacher was like, I don't care about this at all, but good job. It was interesting. So it was like a very satisfying to be like, I felt like I had a really good response from my class, and then when we screened it to the local community in Columbus, it was really nice and got a lot of compliments. Got a lot of compliments for Nate, so that's really what it's about. Just kidding. But and then I ended up showing. I haven't been able to go to most of the festivals I've been in. I've been in a couple in Athens, and then I got to go to the one Athens International Film Festival, and then Chagrin Falls Documentary Festival, which I was able to go with my producer as well, which is really awesome and nice. Really another intimate setting. So it's been nice to kind of be able to share the doc in places where I can kind of talk about it. And actually, that screening was out in Chagrin was outside, which is kind of cool along the river there if anyone's been. So yeah, I think it's been good, and it's I always get that kind of that response was like, "Wow, I didn't know this would be interesting." Kind of like, so it has a little bit, I guess, the underdog of like, well, I don't care about this silly grass sciencey thing, and then it's fun to be able to win people over with Nate's help.
Right. And keep it with your organic feeling that you in filmmaking style. You did that with the title too. There many clever titles you could have come up with, but you settled on looking for Johnson Grass. How did that come about?
I always struggle with titles. So I feel like that is the one thing if I would do anything differently, maybe workshop it a little bit more. But I don't know. I kind of he actually says it in one of them. It was kind of a funny thing. Or it's I feel like a little bit of a play on film titles because I feel like there's a bunch of looking for a blank, looking for blah 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 within literature and film. So it's just kind of a funny thing. And it really was kind of what it's about because it's a kind of a road trip. Nate's looking for Johnson grass kind of thing.
Right, exactly. And I like the way it respected the environment and nature and the
Hmm.
sciences because I'm sure you've heard from your classmates, you could have done so much in a comedy realm with this, but you
Yeah.
stuck to, your specific genre of documenting this. So
Yeah.
that's really good. And you kept focus.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I never even, yeah, I guess that's me just buying into seeing when kind of collaborating with Nate. Even though it was kind of absurd in a way, but I never kind of thought of it as that. Because it really is about kind of science education. I feel like Nate kind of has enough of a lightness to him and kind of has enough self-awareness, where he's like, I just like being out with a shovel. And then he's like kind of laughing at himself. So I think the comedy is kind of within.
Right. And this is so serious enough. And I mean this in all good taste that I could see Saturday Night Live doing a spoof on this.
Oh
You
yeah. 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 I'd love that. Maybe one day we could get it.
Is that because they do spoofs on serious things? So this is something
Yeah.
serious and they can run away with that. So I
Yeah.
know you're out in Colorado right now. Tell us a little bit about what's going on out there.
Yeah, so actually, I graduated last spring, kind of did some freelancing stuff, and then kind of last fall, much like Nate, I wanted to get out and into the environment to do something with my hands, kind of be out out of the film world for a little bit. And so I applied to a bunch of different AmeriCorps positions through a nonprofit called Conservation Legacy. So it's a Conservation Legacy is a program of AmeriCorps, and I'm placed here in Mesa Verde National Park. I'm actually working in the volunteer program. This is called the Community Volunteer Ambassador. But yeah, so I kind of applied to this thing. This is the first place that kind of said yes. So I was like, sure, let's go out. I live my whole 23 years mostly in Ohio. So this is the first time I've lived outside the state. And I've moved to rural Colorado in Mesa Verde National Park. You may have seen the pictures of the iconic cliff dwellings from the ancestral Pueblo people. There's an amazing history here, an amazing cultural park that we have. It's kind of like the one cultural park in the National Park Service, but we do tours of the dwellings and stuff like that, and try to do. And I'm kind of within the interpretation education team here, so hope to get back behind the camera here within the maybe week or next week, and kind of collaborate with the rangers and interns here to make some cool stories.
Oh, that would be great. That really would be. And, you have that, as I said, organic way of telling stories. So you have a perfect opportunity to do that as well, too. Did you look, does lemongrass grow out there? If so, did you look for any?
I've been looking. I realized I made so many mistakes, and sometimes talking about interviews with people where I'm like saying the wrong thing, and then they'll be like, well, it's not exactly like that. So I'm less and less confident in my ability to identify it. But, and I also kind of saw most of it when it was kind of in its full, at the end of the season, of its growing season, where it was kind of starting to decay a little bit. But there might be some in my yard. I believe. I don't want it to be, because it's an invasive species, and that's the big thing, is kind of almost in a little way raising awareness about how these species kind of irresponsibly come to our environments and ecosystems. But it's kind of fun to see it, and I have, yeah, I've seen it around. I know it's in Arizona, and there's kind of this weird. It possibly could have been introduced in the West and the South, and it's kind of meeting in Texas. But yeah, I'll have to let you know. I'll keep you posted if I see some bloom in my
Right. I said
yard.
lemongrass. I meant Johnson grass, but you know
Yeah,
what
yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
in that sense. So great. This has been such a fun and great conversation
Yeah,
with
thank you.
you. Thank you so much for joining us. I wish you
Yeah,
all the best out there, and I hope to see some more work from you soon.
absolutely. I hope to keep at it. Thank you so much for this, Eric.
You're welcome. Um, Jeremy Schwochow, director of Looking for Lemongrass. Thank you very much. And thank you to our audience for joining us for this important and invigorating conversation. For more information about upcoming film festivals, please visit us at clevelandfilm.org. I'm Eric Siler. Thank you.
Thanks.